So yesterday I posted a short blog post on Wingsplain about this card. I actually had to look up how to pronounce this thing. It's called Red Avadavat. It's also known as the Strawberry Finch. I'm probably going to refer to this as Red Ava for short. So I posed the question with this card, is this the next Killdeer or Franklin's Go? And I got some mixed feedback all across the board. Some people said no way, some people said yes, this is awesome, amazing. So I just want to go into a deeper dive into this card, and this is going to be an off-the-cuff, unscripted analysis. So I think the easiest comparison to draw between Red Ava and another card is Savvy's Warbler. Now we can see here they can both go in the wetlands. They both cost 1 food. Red Ava is 2 points, but Savvy's Warbler is 1 point. So the Ava beats it out there, but the nest size is 3 on the Ava and 4 on the Warbler. And you see this dynamic play out in many cards where they might have a smaller nest, but they make up for that in raw victory points. But where the Ava really pulls ahead is that its nest is a star nest. So that really increases its versatility for various round goals and bonus cards. So the Ava qualifies for all the nest-specific bonus cards, and that can be especially potent depending on what you have in front of you at the time and whatever game you're playing. So both of these birds draw 2 cards, and the Warbler hands out 1 card to all opponents. But the Ava, in comparison, gives out 1 card, albeit from your hand, to only 1 player. And not only that, but the Ava can do that from the grasslands. Now, imagine being able to play Savvy's Warbler in the grasslands. I think people would be talking about that card a lot more than they do today. And an interesting dynamic about that draw 2 cards. If we look at the Power 4, the Ravens, they discard an egg to get 2 food. And, the Ravens cost 3 food. And we go on and on about how they break the game. But when you compare them to crows, American Crow specifically, the American Crow costs 1 food, you discard an egg, and you only get 1 food by comparison. That's a 50% reduction in the total food that you get. But we don't talk about how overpowered crows are. There's something about that magic number of 2, and when we draw the comparison to Killdeer and Franklin's Go, we see the same thing. You discard an egg and you get 2 cards, and that's pretty amazing from the grasslands. Now you need to discard an egg, and you're taking the lay eggs action in your grasslands, so you're generating the fuel for Killdeer and Franklin's Go. Whereas the Red Ava, it doesn't have access to that wider range of cards. It's tapping into your hand at that moment. So some people argue that, well, you gotta have that card in hand, and that makes not only that, but that you got to give it to your opponent, and that makes this a not that great card, or it's nowhere near as close to power as Killdeer and Franklin's Go. And that's a good point. You don't want to give resources to your opponents, generally speaking, from a competitive standpoint. But where Red Ava really, I think, kind of bucks that trend is that you control that card. So if you have a bad card in your hand, let's say you have a turkey vulture, and it's a low point value bird, and your opponents don't play any predators, that card is basically worthless to you, and it's worthless to everyone else at the table. So you could hand that to an opponent of your choice, maybe pick the person that seems to be falling behind more. That'll be more of an impact in a multiplayer game, not a 2-player game where your opponent is set. But then you get to turn that bad card, quote unquote, into 2 brand new cards that could be, average to great cards. So you've transformed your card quality from bad to average, or maybe you got another bad card, but you're drawing 2. So you're turning 1 card into 2 cards. So you're gaining 1 net card, but you're doubling your card quality. Another point I want to cover is that that there are going to be times where you have several cards in your hand, or maybe one or two or whatever it might be, and those cards are really good, and you don't want to give any of them away. I mean, you don't want to give the best cards in the game away to your opponent, right? So having good cards in your hand is a real good position to be in, generally speaking. I don't even think generally that's the ideal state you want to be in. You want to have good cards in your hand at all times when cards matter, right? So you're just not going to use the Ava's power in that instance. You're going to be focusing on getting the food you need to play those birds from your hand. Maybe you had to dip into the grasslands in order to get the eggs to play those cards from your hand. So you're just going to skip the Ava's power in that instance. And in this regard, the Red Ava faces that same type of dilemma that tucking birds do in your forest or your grasslands. Sometimes you have a low volume of cards in your hand, but you draw into something that's really good and you want to play it. So you end up skipping your tucking bird or your tucking power. And that's just kind of an existential part of Wingspan. So here now we can see the Red Ava side by side with Killdeer and Franklin's Gull, and you can see a lot of interesting things here. So it's like Red Ava is kind of a blend of both Killdeer and Franklin's Gull. Franklin's Gull costs 2 food. Killdeer costs 1 food, although you can use either worms or seeds to pay its cost, and the Ava costs 1 seed. And as far as the nest goes, the Ava is a mashup of Killdeer's egg volume and Franklin's Gull's star nest. So the Ava kind of makes out with the best of all worlds as far as its general qualities go. Killdeer and Franklin's Gull can be played in the wetlands, but that almost never comes into play. These cards want to be played into the grasslands 99.9% of the time, right? But the Red Ava, by comparison, can actually make really good use of its wetland capability. Throwing the Ava down in the wetlands, you're going to have that extra card volume just by virtue of being in the wetlands and having the draw card action at your disposal, and you're more likely to see more quote-unquote bad cards to hand out to your opponent, and then you can turn that bad card into 2 brand new cards. So again, just to cover that magic number of 2, we can see the Red Ava draws 2 cards, just like Franklin's Gull and Killdeer. And we go on and on about how powerful these 2 cards are. And they're probably, Killdeer and Franklin's Gull are probably the 2 best cards in the game. I don't think there's going to be too many people that argue with that. So in conclusion, I think everyone should keep an open mind with this card. We got that magic rule of 2, so to speak. And I know I've been guilty of sleeping on certain cards in the past where I thought they weren't really that great, and then they end up in practice being quite amazing. Some examples of that would include tucking bird, tuck draw birds that can go into the grasslands. In my early days playing Wingspan, I used to kind of mentally penalize a card like Barn Swallow, because if you play it in the grasslands, well, you need a card to tuck from your hand in order to draw a card. So you're not putting it in the habitat that feels its resource, such as the wetlands. But over time, what I came to learn, and many people came to learn, is that even if you just got those couple cards in your hand and you manage to stack those tuck draw birds, and along with a Killdeer or a Franklin's Gull, you really establish one of the strongest engines in the game, if not the strongest engine in the game, stacking all those point-scoring, card-drawing birds in the grasslands. So thanks for joining me for this unscripted, deeper look at Red Avadavat. If you found this to be interesting, entertaining, educational, do me a favor and hit that like button. I really enjoy bringing this type of content to you guys. I love Wingspan, and I love making videos, I've come to learn. So thanks a lot for watching, and stay tuned for more.